In this behind the scenes video, we're assessing the video workflow of the Sony A7C, its bitrates, picture profiles, and Catalyst browse usability. Thank you to NordPass for sponsoring today's video. NordPass helps you generate the most secure passwords. The more complex your password, the more secure your account and information when you're browsing online. NordPass has a variety of amazing tools to keep your data safe, like password health, data breach scanner, and password generation. All of this accessible with your one master password. This NordPass shoot was focused around the benefits of using NordPass to make your life easier and reduce the risk of being locked out of your important accounts. For this shoot, we're using Sony A7C on a Moza Air 2 gimbal using the Tamron 28-75 2.8 lens. This is my go-to setup for all YouTube and professional work. On set we have Freddie, our actor, Sam, our behind-the-scenes videographer, and Lewis, our cat whisperer. The video required just one long moving in shot to land on Freddie's face at the final point. For all the purposes of this behind the scenes, we overshot this particular take, just so we can demonstrate the differences in image quality on the Sony A7C when recording in various bit rates, resolutions, and picture profiles. Let's look over all the different takes that we got. We got everything from 1080p 25p at 50 megabytes a second, 4K 60 megabytes a second, and 4K 100 megabytes a second. And in both of these, we shot some in S-Log3 picture profile 8, and then some in my custom picture profile, which is picture profile 1, which I'll drop all the settings for in the description below. I use this picture profile for shooting in darker environments. This right now is currently shot in that picture profile. I first made it for dark environments, and now it's sort of become my main go-to. It's not the flattest profile in the world, but it does manage to be a jack of all trades. And for me, I get really nice color out of it. I do very little in the grade to actually get it to a usable image. First, what I'd like to do is compare the different bit rates that we are using here. So in 1080p, we are using overall a lower res image. In this video, the 1080p has been upscaled to 4K, and this is using 50 megabytes a second bit rate, which is the lowest of the selection that we're looking at right now. What is bit rate? So 50 megabytes per second is the amount of data each second that's been recorded to your media card. So we can see in this image here, obviously 1080p being a smaller image in general, you would think that it doesn't matter that it's not 60 megabits a second 4K, because 50 megabits a second for 1080 is proportionally more data for a smaller image, in theory. But when we actually look into some of the detail in this image, you can see that there's overall just a bit more digital noise, and especially in the shadows in both picture profile 1 and S-Log3. 4K 60 megabytes a second is then somewhat better. It is overall pretty damn good, and I would tend to use this if I needed to, or if I forgot to swap to 100 megabits a second. But both in S-Log3 and picture profile 1, it does look pretty good. But the main problem we're looking at here is in the shadows, and this is where most of our noise begins to appear. When we use 4K 100 megabits a second, that seems to completely reduce most of the noise that we find in our shadows, as you can see in these clips. Now let's look at the image quality and noise performance between the picture profile 1 and the S-Log3. This scene overall was getting quite dark. This was at about 9 PM UK, May. The sun is setting now between 9 and 9:30 PM, so we knew we were going to shoot in this very small window of like twilight. We did bring a light with us to the scene, but we ended up not using it because there was enough daylight to have a nice natural look. Here is S-Log3 ungraded on one of these takes in 4K at 100 megabytes a second. It looks like S-Log3, and then once we grade it, it doesn't look terrible in any way. But once you start zooming into these corners and into these shadows, you can just see a whole like mess of noise just appearing everywhere. Which then, once we look at a similar grade in the picture profile 1 that I've created, a lot of that noise has disappeared and it's much more manageable. Now, while this picture profile 1 isn't as flexible as S-Log3, it's actually more purpose built for this sort of scene compared to S-Log3. The really good place for S-Log2 and S-Log3 is for a wide dynamic range environment, something where we're getting bright sunshine and shadows, and we're trying to balance those. But here we're mainly trying to expose for the scene in the foreground and Freddy's face and outfit, as those are sort of our mid-tones that we're trying to capture. So in any scene like this where you're dealing with lower light, not like nighttime, but lower light, something like this picture profile 1 setting is ideal. And if you can do this at a high bitrate of 4K 100 megabits a second, that is pretty much a guaranteed winner. Out of all the takes we got, 1080p 50 megabytes a second, 4K 60 megabytes a second, and 4K 100 megabytes a second, this particular take is the one that we're going to go with. So there's just a couple more steps before this clip is ready for voiceover, sound design, editing, and the final piece for NordPass. So the next step is going to be putting the clip through Catalyst Browse, Sony's post-image stabilization software, using gyro data to just iron out those last couple of bumps, because this was actually shot on the Sony A7C with the Tamron 28-75mm lens, but I had the zoom extended ever so slightly from 28 to 35, so that can cause a tiny bit of rock on the Moser Air 2, very minimal, but just a little bit with my steps especially to iron out using Catalyst Browse. So we'll jump into that now. Our last step in getting the best out of this footage is some Catalyst Browse stabilization. Catalyst Browse, if you haven't used it, takes advantage of the A7C's built-in gyro data to implement some fantastic stabilization in post. Given that we're already on a gimbal, we'll be mostly fine, but I did actually have the 28-75 slightly extended to 35mm, which does cause some micro jitters if not rebalanced perfectly, which, since having Catalyst Browse, I don't rebalance it perfectly just because I can iron out all these micro jitters using Catalyst Browse. For this particular take, I didn't need to crop in too far, and we're dealing with a 4K image, so we actually have a lot of flexibility. This is cropped in to about 90%, and that gives us just enough stabilization on those little micro jitters to have a perfectly smooth shot. Now, really fast, I'm going to add in my final color grade on the chosen take in DaVinci Resolve. And we're also trying to hide this Deliveroo logo, because like we wanted to use a Deliveroo jacket, but it's also like, don't show the logo. And yeah, I wanted to challenge myself in post. So here we are, we're going to try and motion track this Deliveroo logo so we can try and blur it out the best we can. Then once we've got our voiceover and sound design added in, we are good to go. And here is the final video. Today's gig economy provides lots of opportunities for anyone with an internet connection. That is, if you haven't forgotten your password and you can still log in to see your next delivery. Never forget your password. Keep it safe. Keep it NordPass. Thank you again to NordPass for sponsoring today's video. Go check out the link in the description below, nordpass.com/George Holden, where you can get 70% off of their spring forward sale, plus an additional month free when you're using this code right here, also in the description below. I use NordPass every single day across all of my devices to generate secure passwords that are both complex and difficult to guess for anyone that's trying to copy your password, and it generates them for you perfectly, and then these are all saved within the NordPass app. So get started with NordPass today. I hope you've enjoyed today's video and you have found it very helpful. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next one.